Yeah, that's the good stuff right here. Hard, soft literature. Yeah. I mean, sort of, kind of. I tell you what, I think I'll check it out. I'm not normally one to destroy books, but I'm just kind of baked for it. Hiya, folks. Fruit Doggy here to do another book discussion. Today, I am covering Dean Koontz's Watchers. It has about 480 pages and was published in 1987. And not too surprising, Dean Koontz did I'm going to call it sort of a sci-fi, not quite horror level story, more on the sci-fi side this time. From a top secret government laboratory come two genetically altered life forms. One is a magnificent dog of astonishing intelligence. The other, a hybrid monster of a brutally violent nature. And both are on the loose. Best-selling author Dean R. Koontz presents his most terrifying, dramatic, and moving novel, the explosive story of a man and a woman caught in a relentless storm of mankind's darkest creation. This is a book that interested me, held my attention, but I would say from maybe about the midway point on, I was somewhat rolling my eyes and was I kept reading it. I wanted to see how it ended, but it just felt a little too, I'll say, like, cliche. It was going in too obvious of a direction. And I guess the way to put it is, the dog is an interesting idea, an interesting, I'm going to call it a character because of how intelligent it is. The way it acts and the way it interacts with other characters. It has all of the loyalty, all of the general compassion and love that a dog is able to show. But then it seems like it has, this is somewhat hard to gauge, but at least average human intelligence, able to communicate. Again, it can't just stand up on its hind legs and start smoking a pipe or a cigar and then having a conversation with you. It's not that style, but as the story progresses and as the humans around the dog start to figure out, wow, this creature is highly intelligent, they come up with different ways for it to express itself. So it can understand writing English alphabet. It strings together sentences that way. Excuse me. And I imagine, even though it'd be somewhat hard to do, either through barking or like tapping its paw, it probably could have communicated through Morse code even. But anyways, I would say the dog was probably one of the more interesting aspects of the story because, again, as humans kind of start scratching their head, and it's like, man, this dog seems oddly intelligent. But then they still have to get through that communication barrier. The fact that the dog just can't hold a conversation with them, and they have to be kind of creative, a little bit crafty. That's an interesting element. Unfortunately, on the other hand, the violent monster, this abominable creation, it has intelligence, but because it's the antagonist force, we don't get nearly enough of an idea or that comparison and contrast as to what goes on in its mindset, to what it's really capable of. I mean, through its desire to kill and destroy, we see intelligence in that sense, but, excuse me, it just seems very lacking in contrast. It doesn't have moments that are as satisfying or interesting, I didn't think. Excuse me. And I think it could have had a pretty interesting contrast, really. I mean, it would have been strange if it had been perhaps too smart. If it was, you know, gathering a firearm and driving a vehicle, that'd probably go a little too far. But we just don't really get to see its intelligence nearly as much, and I think that really is a disappointing factor. Um, the woman, like she just kind of fell into the story as just a stereotypical system of the action hero male, and then his compassionate, empathetic woman who they kind of stumble into each other. They go through a harrowing experience in action movie stereotypes. And again, it was published in the 80s. That was following the general pattern and form that was very popular at the time. So I can't really bash Dean Koontz for falling into that too much. But again, a cliche is a cliche. And I find that when I'm reading a book, because it is that higher level of investment, a little bit more effort than just watching a movie, I do want more from that when I'm reading. If this were just a movie, it's like, yeah, I can sit down 70, 90 minutes, just kind of kick back and, yeah, the guy gets the girl and blah, 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 blah. They both have the cruel moments. But when I'm reading the book, it's like, ugh, come on, guys. Let's do something a little bit more interesting with this. But I would say that the way the story was presented, it was necessary, but I found how successful the male protagonist was to be a bit unbelievable, because he always seemed to be able to think 2 or 3 steps ahead. He was always like making all the right choices, always staying ahead, making sure that they wouldn't be followed, they wouldn't be captured. He's able to get falsified documentation so they can falsify their identity, paying it all with cash. It just seemed like he had too many resources and was just a little too faultless. And again, it's like, well, considering the stakes at play, the difficulty of the situation, he needed to do these things. But I think for me, if you're going to take a military secret, it gets out, and you throw this into the average person's circumstances, I think that's more interesting than throwing that situation into an exceptional person's circumstances. It's like, oh, well, I'm this incredible military person. I've served in the military for 10 years. I've got all this training. I'm incredibly brilliant. I'm independently wealthy. I can take all this vacation time. I don't have to worry about my job. That just, it's not nearly as interesting or engaging, I find, because, all of these other issues and problems that would arise and that they'd have to address, they just get shoved aside. They don't have to worry about those. Those are matters of no consequence. And it's like, well, do I really want to read about an average person having to address these issues? Yeah, kind of, because I think it's the novel situation throwing that gigantic monkey wrench into matters and trying to navigate those issues and those problems. And I was like, okay, how do I make this work? This is very stressful, very anxiety inducing. I don't have a game plan just that I can formulate and cook up in 30 seconds flat, and let's take an action oriented approach and let's get things done. It's like, I need to take a couple of days just to figure out how to balance all these different problems. Some people just having a pet in the house, I mean, that's a little extreme, but that could be a problem in and of itself, let alone all of the entanglements that this situation would bring to the table. And no, I do not want to read a book about a normal household having to tackle the problems of taking a random stray into the house. But I hope you know kind of what I mean. Like, there's a certain middle ground where I think that's where you hit the sweet spot that's more captivating, as opposed to, again, as I said, throwing a novel situation, a difficult situation into an exceptional person's life. And I think what becomes very ironic is because there's more than one human character that's fairly exceptional in this book that gets into situations that are very strange and bizarre, and they're able to pull it off very not satisfactory, um, competently, highly competent. That in some ways the scientific experiments become more realistic than the people involved in the situation. So the incredibly intelligent dog seemed more believable to me than the protagonist who is able to do anything, is able to think all these steps ahead, no problems, and gets things done. And then there's another character that's not even mentioned on the back of in the synopsis. They're basically a mafia hitman, and I understand that that person would be able to do their job pretty well, but there's at least one or two hits where it's like, how in the heck did they pull that off so cleanly, so easily, no problems, no witnesses, and it's like, give me a break, because it was in a public diner. He killed the waitress. Even he didn't just go after his targets. He also was like, "Hey, I'm going to kill the waitress," and he's not really. Sorry, let me rephrase that. He's not really on anybody's radar. He's very unknown to the police, to people who'd be searching for him. I think, if I remember right, towards the end of the book, they were starting to catch on, but I just felt like it was completely, excuse me, ridiculous to think that he was able to pull off all of these hits, especially ones that started going more into the public domain, out in broad daylight public. Again, not out on the street, but in the middle of a freaking public diner. Yeah, no problem. Just found that to be completely unbelievable, and just at that point, again, the human character is less believable than the scientific experiment. I think you've kind of done something wrong if that's the case. And then plus he had this really strange, like, spiritual belief that it's like, I don't even know where that came from. I understand, going to the mind of a homicidal maniac, they're not probably going to be the most sane people in the world, but I still find his characterization to be, I'm just going to say, strange, hard to swallow, I guess would be another way to put it. So I guess if you really like action movie schlock, if you just cannot get enough of that, especially kind of the 80s style, then this might be the story for you. It really does kind of check off all those marks. I would say it really does feel like this would be an 80s action movie. But if some of the different points I was bringing up would bother you, if you kind of think things out more logically, and it's like, I don't know, that just doesn't mesh to me, that doesn't add up, then this would probably be one to avoid. I have to admit, the scientific experiment angle, with animal subjects, I wonder if it's because it's such a triggering issue for people, the idea of animals being harmed, that it doesn't come up incredibly often. That I don't see, like I was saying, I don't see this incredibly often. So something of this nature could be kind of novel or interesting. However, having said that, I've also seen plenty of books where they're not necessarily military experiments, but you just have exceptional animals that human beings stumble across, and the hijinks that come from that. So even in that sense, it's not really that novel or interesting. I can think of at least a couple. where it was very intelligent felines, and how, even felines with special abilities that's like more supernatural or alien life form based. So it's like, yeah, I can't even suggest it for that little niche. But yeah, again, I would have to say that my favorite character from the book was a dog. I thought they were the most believable and most interesting. But anyways, I don't really think it's worth reading. I mean, if you were to borrow it, I don't think it would be that. I mean, it's not that bad of a read. I just don't think it's worth reading, if that makes sense. I'd probably say burn it. I feel like that'd be a little bit of a shame. I think there are tangents and elements that are worthwhile, but I think it failed in some key areas for the execution. But anyways, that's just my 2 cents. As always, feel free to let me know what you thought, if you agree, disagree. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed it, folks. I'll see you around later. And as always, fruit and doggy. Well, actually, I guess that makes sense. I agree with the dog character. And the name of my channel. Like I said, though, see you around later. Yes, there really is nothing quite like curling up with a fine piece of literature, if you know what I mean.